Hey everybody, before we get into episode 26 with Will, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the support so far. There's a lot of people that watch the video or listen to the podcast, but maybe you're not following or subscribing on any of the channels that this goes out to. So please, if you can, like, comment, subscribe on all those platforms. It really, really helps us grow the podcast. Also, you may notice if you follow me on LinkedIn, I have rebranded away from Charles Kiriakou Coaching to Infinite Learning. I've recently got a new website, so please go and have a look at that. I'm taking on new coaching and training clients as we speak. So if you're in the recruitment sector as a recruiter, a founder, a leader that are looking for external coaching and training, please, please, please reach out. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's get into the video with Will. You're going to really, really enjoy this. Until next time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast with your host, Charles Kiriakou. Today, I'm joined by Will Bourne. Will, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm very well, mate. Very well. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, look, really, really excited to get into this. But for people that may or may not know you, Will, give us a little bit of an introduction to, what you do at the minute, and how long you've been in recruitment, all that type of stuff.
Okay. Well, I think they say recruitment is like dog years, right? So I think it feels like I've been in recruitment for the best part of 500 years. But I think about 15 years now, I've been in recruitment. I started at a boutique headhunting agency in my very early years. Business development was kind of where I started because I'd had a bit of a career in cold calling before that, selling asset finance for the banking sector. So I kind of naturally just took to the business development element of recruitment. Then I learned the resourcing candidate side of it. And in about a year's time, I was like smashing it really. I just kind of took to it like a duck to water. 15 years later, I've done 2 startups. One was funded, which I built from my bedroom in Warsaw in the West Midlands. Didn't have a website for 6 months, but somehow managed to build a business that I scaled, moved to London. And I was the MD of a company called Nickel Curtain, which are, probably one of London's biggest fintech recruitment agencies. And the latest startup was Bootstrap. So I did the latest startup Recall Consulting with my own money, my own blood, sweat, tears went into that for 4 years. I started that up in the pandemic. And here we are today. So much a whistle-stop tour of my life, really, that for you, mate.
Nice. Well, I think there's a lot of, when we first spoke, there's a lot of stuff that I think you could add a tremendous amount of value. But one of the key topics that you wanted to discuss and something that you were really passionate about actually is something you just mentioned there, which was, setting up and scaling a business with and without funding. There's going to be a lot of people listening to this that either want to start their own recruitment business or in the process of starting up their own recruitment business. And, a lot of people consider going through the funding route. And I think, there's, from what I can understand, because I'm very clueless to that, if I'm being frank, is I don't really understand a lot. But some people, it's like, yeah, it's the best thing in the world, or it's the absolute worst thing. You've obviously had experience with both. Talk us through kind of what that's been like, with and without.
The pressure is consistent, in honesty. Whether you go and work for somebody or whether you work for yourself, you're typically going to be tasked in recruitment to go and win customers and place candidates into those customers, right? So the only difference is really that you're going to be getting a base salary to do it one way. I haven't had a base salary now for many, many years because obviously I've just been doing my own thing. So setting up from scratch really is more about how much risk you're willing to take on. And I've had this chat a few times really in the last 12, 18 months where people say, should I set up on my own or should I just go and get a job effectively and do that job for somebody else? And it's more about how leveraged you are in your personal circumstances as to whether you need funding or not, if you are committed to setting up your own business. Because, you'll get funding, no problem in recruitment. If you're a good recruiter and you've got a good track record, people will always back you. But I wouldn't say you need to take that level of, it's like having a boss, having an investor is like having a boss. And I think a lot of people go and set up their own organizations because they don't want a boss anymore. So you have to really consider that. And if you have kids at home, if you've got a big mortgage, if you've got a nice flash car on the drive or something, and you're going to go and do a startup, you're probably going to have to kiss goodbye to a lot of the luxuries that you have in life, unless you go and get funding, and that funder is willing to pay you a base salary. But like I say, the challenge exists either way because you still have to build something from scratch. You've still got to set your strategy. You've still got to understand what the market conditions are. You've got to be a very good market analyst, you've got to see where the market is now, where it has been, and where it's going to be in 12, 18, 24 months time. And you've got to really think, how am I going to go inch wide, mile deep in that market and actually add value? And once you get a grip of that and you understand, right, this is actually how I'm going to do it and execute, the rest is all in your activity. It's about how much graft and how much grind you're willing to put in to build something from scratch, because it's not easy.
Well, I think that's like anything in business. You have to make sacrifices, and something I noticed very, very different from setting up a recruitment business, because what I do at the minute is very much kind of like a lifestyle business, right? But you do have to sacrifice things. Like when I was working full time, I had a gym right next to the office. So you're doing a 9 to 5, you go to the gym every day during your lunch break, and you sit in the sauna. The first few months of doing like coaching business, like you don't have any bloody clients. Like you can't be going to the gym. Like you're not paying your bills. Like all your friends are like, oh, should we go pub? You're like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not spending my savings on beer. Like I need to pay my bloody mortgage. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy.
I know exactly what you mean. I actually I just managed to somehow get a load of free equipment. I bought I had a kettlebell and a big sandbag that I just used to throw about, go down the park, go for a run, and I used to skip and throw my kettlebell and my sandbag around because it was free. I went through all my banking statements for like the last 6 months, and I figured out how much money I was spending on things like coffees, sandwiches out, just the little things. And once I equated that up to an actual weekly amount, it was a lot. I'm probably talking like, maybe like 40, 50 quid a week on just coffees and sandwiches and stuff like that. And I'm like, right, it's got to go. And you have to redefine what your life looks like when you get into your 0 to 1 build, because it has to go. I think more so from a mentality perspective. I know the whole ethos of your podcast here is how to be 1% better. And if you can improve your mindset 1%, that's a big step forward. And I think when you come into something where you've got a clean slate and it's a completely greenfield business that you're setting up, you have to be in the right mindset. You've got to burn the bridges. You've got to literally burn the boats, shut the door behind you, and get ready to just think, right, 3 to 6 months, I've got no income. Forget everything else. I've got no money coming in for 3 to 6 months. And can I afford to do that? Have I got savings in the bank to get me to that point? And then you know exactly what you've got to put in day to day to make money appear, because depending on what type of recruitment you do, if you do perm recruitment, you might have a rebate period, so you can't actually touch the money if you do earn it. And you've got a process that you have to go through. Then the candidate has to be selected. Sometimes it can be 3 to 6 months before you even can touch the money that you've earned. Contract recruitment, temp recruitment, you've obviously got to factor in things like invoice discounting and how you're actually going to finance the workers being on site. So there's a lot of calculations you have to put into it, and then you have to figure out, right, how quickly do I actually need to win my first customer here, and where is it coming from? And then you just have to be tenacious. You have to stop at nothing to make that happen.
Yeah. Oh my God. So from your perspective, then you've obviously gone through both going into investment and doing it with your own sort of money. What made you kind of go down the investment route? I know obviously you mentioned about how if you go through the investment route, you've essentially got like that safety bubble in terms of having that salary and things like that. But what made you specifically then go down that route and get funding?
It's a funny story, really, because I actually didn't set out. My agenda wasn't like, right, let's go and do a startup. I worked at a company called Emerald in Birmingham, Emerald Technology, good company, still exists today. I did 5 years there. Had a great time, made some great friends, and I moved on from that business. And the reason that I moved on is because I actually had a complete mental breakdown at that point in my life. I had a few things happen. My stepdad died, and some other things came at the same time, and it just knocked me clean off my feet. It's completely unexpected. All of these things come in and knock me sideways, to be honest. So I took 3 months off. My first job back after that was a startup. But there was a company called Networkers. Some people listening might remember Networkers from a few years back, and they had an exit. They sold the company to another recruitment group called Gattaca. I'm sure it was Gattaca. And the guys from Networkers, they were trying to hire me to their business for a couple of years, and I just never wanted to move to London. I was doing really well in Birmingham. I had a good life. I was earning good money, good friends, good things going on. But he messaged me in that 3-month period, just out of nowhere, saying like, "What you got going on? What you up to?" This was one of the guys that sold the company. And I was like, actually, I'm thinking about what to do next. And he said, well, okay, well, I'm looking to invest in a startup. I'm looking to back a startup, and I'm I'm thinking you could be the guy to do it. So that's how it came about, really. I didn't go touting for investment. I didn't go touting for it. It was just so happened that, you know, I kind of already knew the person, really. So it was a bit of a stroke of luck. But I still had to build everything, you know. So it was a case of, right, this is what I'm willing to invest. You tell me what market you're going to go after. You tell me what it looks like. What does the contract business look like? What does the perm business look like? What market do we approach? Where? Why? What's going to be the target NFI? What's going to be the target margins on contract, on perm? How do we do invoice? You know, all of these things, really, I had to just learn, because I'd never built a business from scratch. And that's kind of how it all came about, really. They were great investors. You know, they were really behind the project and very supportive in what the goal was. You know, was to build it and to build a company to sell. Again, that's what they wanted to go through. And it was one hell of an experience, let me tell you.
So I've heard many people say some horror stories. It sounds like that was a fairly decent story. I'm wondering what horror stories have you heard about people going through investment or having that funding element?
I think, in honesty, you can find a horror story in anything. I think it's really about how you approach it. You know, what your perspective and your outlook is on situations. I could give you horror stories from that journey that I went on with the first startup, because there are, and there always will be in startups, and there always will be in every situation. If you want to find a horror story, you know, somebody will give you one. But I think what I prefer to focus on, really, is the learn that I got from it. You know, whilst there were some things that happened that perhaps I find distasteful, and I don't like to reflect on negatively, I still think it's taught me a lot. You know, I learned how to navigate a funded startup. I learned how to build something from scratch. I learned how to work with an investor. I learned how to pitch to an investor, how to, you know, go through that process and what a structure looks like in terms of the contracts, etc. And I've never got that experience otherwise. Whilst there were a lot of things that happened that I could sit here and give you horror stories, I don't really want to do that. You know, I don't want to kind of come here and talk negatively about people and talk negatively about my situations, because let's focus on the positives. Let's make that 1% a positive 1%.
Yeah, nice. Well, that's the attitude, right? Whenever I speak to people that are, you know, working within a startup, business owners and stuff, that's typically the mindset people have. And it's quite interesting. I'm sure you will get what I'm about to say, because you've managed recruiters before. But, you know, I sit down with recruiters sometimes and it's, you know, the market's this, or, you know, this is that, and you're like, right, okay, you're completely obsessed and focusing on the negatives. Like, that's not serving you well at all. And I get, because during COVID, I remember my old sales director, who I love and I still love to this day, you know, you need to be positive. You need to be positive. Yeah, that's easy to say, but when you're literally trapped in your bedroom in lockdown, going through like a mental health crisis, it's like, you know, try and be positive. Then it's very, very tough. But in a relatively normal to difficult type of market, you know, I always say to people, like, look, like, you have to help yourself. You have to be positive. You have to like, and if, quote, a negative thing happens, reframe it rather than look at it as like a terrible thing. What did you actually learn from it? And then if you can see that there's a lesson from it, then boom, you've got a positive, right?
Yeah. There's always a lesson, always. You know, in every situation, good or bad, you know, you can find what the outcomes were and how you got there and what you could do differently next time. I think for me, like, mental health is quite a big topic. You know, I've actually written a book on mental health, based on my own personal experiences. And it's, for me, how you frame these situations is all about the plan that you build around your life. And I think, you know, every person should have a plan, a day-to-day plan, especially in recruitment, in sales. You know, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have kind of tangible visibility of how you're going to approach your goals and your outcomes, you run the risk of losing purpose. And, you know, it is purpose that drives us every day. What is the purpose that you're doing this podcast? What is the purpose that I'm trying to build a new product business? And what I've built things in the past, it's the purpose of doing that, which gets me out of bed. And I think those recruiters who perhaps fall foul to the narrative that they perhaps hear from negative people around them, of the market's too tough, and, you know, nobody's hiring, or, you know, everybody just puts the phone down on me, or, you know, we could all find those kinds of things to moan and bleat about, but what are you going to do about it? What's your plan? How are you going to do it differently? You know, what's your angle of attack that's going to be different tomorrow to what it was today? If today's been not the outcomes you wanted them to be, how are we going to make that different tomorrow? You know, some people have to up their outputs by 25%. You know, if people don't know how to reinvent themselves, just do more. You know, when I first came into recruitment, I didn't know anything about recruitment. I knew how to sell stuff. So I just said, well, I'm going to outwork everybody. I can't outsmart them yet, but I can outwork them. So I just put an extra 25-30% time in.
I love that. I want to pick you up on something that you just said there, because this is probably the most common challenge that I face doing my job right now. So most clients, well, every client I've worked with, I've delivered a lot of the theory stuff, but then equally with the theory stuff, I do a lot of practical. So on and off desk call coaching. So we listen back to the calls, we listen into live calls with them, coach them through that. We do tons of role plays. So it's
Yep.
not just them sat in a room just doing a bloody presentation, like here's
Mm.
how to do a cold call. It's like
Yep.
actually put it into practice, right?
Mm. Mm.
But one of the biggest issues that I have, because I'm only on site 1 day a week, right? I'm not in the office 5 days a week. So I can't make sure that they are building that habit. I have to then pass it over to managers.
Yeah.
Uh, Pretty much every recruiter will come back to me and be like, "I'm really struggle to create an effective day plan. I really struggle to have an effective week plan." And they
Mm.
always ask me, like, "What did you do when you were a recruiter?" Because I was a very, very successful business developer and a
Yep.
billing manager.
Mm.
I didn't ever really have a day plan to begin with. And then when I kind of maximized that market for a bit and pivoted, I was like, "Oh shit, without any planning and organization, I'm really struggling." So I had to, you
Mm.
know, create some sort of plan that worked for me. So I used to have a double-sided sheet with a day plan, and in my day plan it would be like, 9 till 10, 10 business development calls. And then on the back side of that piece of paper, it would have like my to-do list.
Yep.
Some people just have a to-do list. I think that's kind of crazy. I think you need to have a bit of a plan. These days, I purely plan through my diary. So my diary is
Mhm.
all color coordinated because of the way my brain works.
Yep.
And then, as you can see, the whiteboard behind me is my week plan. So I plan out like what exercise I'm going to do, what my goals are, and then I take a
Yep.
picture of it at the every single Monday. And then if I ever feel like shit, I look back and go, "Oh, look, all the green ticks of me achieving the goals, and this is where I've come
Yeah.
to."
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'd really like to understand from your perspective from a couple of different sides, for a recruiter at any level and for a founder or maybe just a solo entrepreneur who is struggling with kind of planning, prioritization, goal
Mhm.
setting, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
What's your advice to those people?
I think you touched on it in what you were saying around that's how my mind works. I think you said when you were
Mm,
talking about color coding. Everybody has a way that their neuro pathways connect.
mm,
Some people, like you say, are color coded. Some people have intense ADHD. I have turned ADHD into a superpower as much as I
mm,
possibly can, and I have to make sure that I have a clear focus in a direction to a outcome, because
mhm.
otherwise I'm off, talking about something else. There's another business
Same.
over here that perhaps could prosper, and maybe I could do this over here. Someone's offered me some training to do for this company over here, and I'm like, well, yeah, okay, sweet, yep. So for me, I think it's really important that you make your plan around your outcomes.
Mm,
So before I actually got into sales, my career goal was to have a career in martial arts. So many years ago, I'm much older now. Um, I wanted to be a professional fighter, So
mm,
I was fighting jiu-jitsu, Thai boxing, MMA,
mhm,
and all I ever focused was on the outcomes, right? And so the
mm,
outcomes were always, okay, I have to win that fight.
mhm,
My friends and family are coming to watching me. I can't get embarrassed in front of my friends and family, so I have to win that fight. The outcome is the winning of the fight.
mm,
Jiu-jitsu, I want the gold medal. I want to win the
mhm,
gold medal at this weight category. Thai boxing, I want to win that Thai boxing fight, blah, blah, blah. But it's all very outcome driven. And I
mm,
kind of took that into my sales career, and honestly, and I thought, okay, so what is the outcome that I'm actually looking for here? So
mm,
with business development, for example, to use, the direction that you took there, is to think, right, what do I actually need as an outcome?
mm.
Because I think some people get a little bit hung up on, I need to make 2 hours of calls, or I need to make 100 calls, which
Yeah.
is for me a bit counterproductive. And I think if you
Mm,
think about what actually does an outcome look like from a business development perspective, are you realistically going to sign a contract on your first call that you managed to get somebody on the phone? No. So what I used to play a bit of a game amongst the team when it comes to things like business development. And it used to be, right, let's see how long we can keep people on the phone before they tell us
mm.
to, are we allowed to swear on the podcast?
Yeah, go for
Yeah,
it.
before they tell us to fuck off,
Yeah.
or they hang up, or they end the call. It's like, how much value can you demonstrate? How many hooks can you buy where you're buying yourself another 30
Mm,
seconds before somebody tells you that's the end of it? And that would be the outcome. So in that 30-second stint where you're buying the next hook for another 30 seconds of their time,
mm,
how do you demonstrate value? And that was what we focused on. Right. How do we quickly demonstrate value, and how do we buy another 30 seconds?
mm,
And then we'd have a game in the office, we'd say, right, who's the leaderboard today? Who's going to get the most chunks of 30 seconds on top of the next? And we really kind of just tried to gamify it and make it as interesting and as entertaining as possible. And I think anybody making a plan has to focus on their outcomes and almost reverse engineer how they're going to get
Mm.
there.
Do you know what? I absolutely love that. Because I had a few people on the podcast talk about KPIs, and I had a not a debate, but like I had a conversation with a client the other day about,
Mm.
I don't really think KPIs are really it, blah blah blah. And I always had the analogy that like if you worked with a PT and you're trying to lose weight or trying to put weight on, like in my case, I
Hmm.
tried to put muscle mass on. Um,
Yeah.
if you're not tracking your calories and tracking your diet and how much weight you're lifting, you're never going to be able to like quantify and reverse engineer how you're going to then get your said outcome, right?
Hmm.
But the idea of rather than make X amount of BD calls, of doing your cold calling sprint and seeing how long you can keep that client on the phone,
Yeah.
that's like really sparked a wicked idea in my head because, and I'm sure you've seen this, right? So many recruiters, and to be honest, I put my hand up. I was that recruiter when I was younger, where
Mm.
you almost rush yourself off the phone.
Yeah.
Like you ask a few questions and they go, yeah, 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 I'm a little bit busy, but I can speak. Yeah, we
Hmm.
use agencies, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, right, should we just book a call another time? And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, you just
Yeah.
freeze. Like that idea of like just that gamifying it and seeing who can get an extra 30 seconds, writing it up on the whiteboard in the office is wicked.
Yeah, mate. And the thing is as well, and you touched on it there, you shouldn't be the one ending calls. If you've managed to get somebody on the phone, why the hell are you trying to end the call? You keep that
Literally.
person on the phone and buy as many 30-second hooks for yourself as you can to demonstrate the next layer of value. And it's like a game of tennis, right? If you get an objection, there's a sale there. Otherwise, they would just say fuck off and hang up. Or they would be like, mate, I'm not interested. What do you want? Stop it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for me, it's about as soon as they come back with an objection, I'm like, right,
Mm,
now it's on. And I'm like,
mm,
okay, so, then I'll go into my own techniques of how I open people up and demonstrate value. And as soon as you get to the second objection, you think, right, okay, now we're getting somewhere.
mm,
Now I can see see that narrowing in to potentially where we then agree, like you say, the next call, but they have to initiate it. And say, look, Will,
mm,
I'm running out of time. Great. While I've got you on the phone, what's your email address? And get your diary up now. And I'm gonna slot you an email thing
mm,
right in, and I want you to accept it while we're on the phone. And like, yeah, sweet. So you get that, you get that synced in. And for me, at that point, it's about memorable contact. So after
mm,
every call, I mean, we're going into a BD coaching session here, but while we're on topic, always end the call with your name.
mm,
For me, always end the call with the name because you want memorable contact. Look, my name is Will. Again, been great to talk to you. It's been awesome talking about you and your business. Here's my email. It's coming through now. Please accept it. And I'm going to send you a LinkedIn request so you can put a face to the name, Will Bourne. Every time, every single time.
amazing.
And that memorable contact is what is important.
Mm. Yeah, mate, that's class. That's really good, and I think that's also really really good for a lot of like startup recruitment founders as well. Because as I'm sure you know, there's a lot of people that set up their own recruitment company after doing recruitment
Mm.
for a couple of years. I know a
Yeah.
lot of founders that I've met, they've never had any sort of formal training, and then they
Hmm.
start hiring people. They've never had any formal training. They've been an okay biller in that business before.
Yeah.
Then they bring people in, and they're like, Charles, we're struggling to pull jobs. Like I can pull jobs okay, but like we're
Mm.
not doing enough. And it's like little tiny things like that, the planning element, the being memorable. There's so many different things that I think, if a trainee or a senior recruiter or a founder or someone that's thinking about starting their business hears that, it's like really,
Yeah.
really invaluable advice, genuinely.
Yeah, for sure. And I think before you start thinking about hiring, you've got to create what's called a scalable model, a repeatable model. So
Mm,
there is a way that you sell to your market, whether you're temp, whether you're contract, whether you're perm. There's a
mhm,
way in which sales is done, that works. You've got to find that, and you've got to repeat that because everybody
mm,
can get a lucky deal and a lucky contract
mhm,
win every now and then, but that's not the scalable element of it.
mm,
When you start then doing every week, my metrics are always 2-4-1. So if you get 10 quality pitches out, 4
mhm.
conversions, 1 will turn into revenue.
Yeah.
If you're protecting those numbers week in, week out, and you found a way to get to those numbers with the path of
Mm,
least resistance, that's then when you hire and you show people how to do that. I think people hire sometimes to try and bring a silver bullet into their organization to think,
mm,
right, you go and win us some clients, um, or yeah, if people see we're hiring, maybe they think, we're a legit company, and because we've got numbers, that
mm.
means that we're credible. Where actually the first thing you have to do is win customers and then turn that into your repeatable, scalable model.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the things that you wanted to talk about and it kind of pivots in, segues in perfectly actually about strategies. I had a
Mm,
guy who's a business coach from the Jump Advisory Group, and the whole thing was about strategy, from setting up the business to creating a bit of a business development strategy, candidate
hmm.
acquisition, exit strategy, etc.
Yep.
If we think about people that have just set up their own recruitment business, or maybe someone that is about to set up their own recruitment business, and equally
Mm,
people are listening to this that are maybe setting up a new market, as just a
hmm.
recruiter, it's very, very similar. Um,
Yep.
I would like to pick your brains as well, actually, just on a BD strategy, because that comes up an awful lot.
Yep.
And I'm a big proponent of just not overcomplicating it. I think
Hmm.
business development is something people really overcomplicate. And then opening up a new market, starting up a
Yeah.
business. I've got a few friends that set up their own recruitment business, and they had a year non-compete. So they had to do a different market for the
Yep.
first year. So they couldn't just leverage off the network. So they had to create a strategy. And people just overcomplicate the shit out of it, to be honest with
Hmm.
you. So
Yep.
what's your thoughts on that? Like, if you were to create like a BD strategy, what would that look like?
The first thing I would want to talk about is how they demonstrate value.
Hmm.
Because people buy from people, and if that person can't demonstrate their value, then there's no BD.
Mm.
There's no new customers, there's no new nothing, unless you get lucky and you get somebody desperate.
Hmm.
But a desperate customer means they're working with 5 or 6 different agencies. Um, so for me, it's about how do you demonstrate your value. And what I do with people is I sit down and I get them to articulate to me what their USPs are. The same way
Hmm.
that you go and buy a car, you go and buy a house. There is a document that you will be given that shows pictures of the house and its dimensions and blah blah
Mm.
blah, all the things that make that thing sellable. You've got to do that. You've got to know first of all, right? These are my 5 USPs personally, and
Hmm.
I've put so many people on the spot with this when I've trained members of my team and other people's teams, and I've gone in and you know worked with some of my friends' recruitment organizations. Okay, what's your 5 USPs? Well, what do you mean?
Mm.
Well, tell me what your 5 USPs are of value in this industry. What is it? I don't understand. The reason that I do that is because I did a cold call many, many years ago to a company called RekBot Software. And the guy was called Dean Martin. He was the VP of worldwide sales. And I cold called him and I got him on the phone and he smashed me. And I
Really?
mean, yeah, oh man, he smashed me so bad. But he was such a good dude. Come the end of the call, he's like, "How do you think you could have done that better?" He actually started to coach me, and this was early in my
Mm.
career. Um, and I was like, to be honest, I don't know really. I've hit you kind of with everything that I kind of know.
Mm.
And he's like, "Well, you haven't shown me value. I don't know who you are as a person,
Hmm.
and what makes you special, what makes me want to work with you." And then the second thing is I don't know the stats that you're presenting to me, what makes you unique to
Mm.
me and my pain that I'm feeling that you can solve. So the first thing I now do is say, right, I want you to write 5 personal USPs down.
I
Five
love that.
USPs that somebody is going to buy into that make you stand out to me. So that could be, look, you know, I like to say to people, I was a career martial artist. I've had a mental
Mm.
breakdown because that's what makes me me, right? And
Mm.
people either buy into that or they don't.
Mm.
And then on the other side, it's the business side of it is who I've worked with, the work that I did for them, the testimonials that I've
Hmm.
got, the value that added to their organization by virtue of the fact that those people didn't leave.
Mm.
In the last 3 years, I've got my stats of how many people failed in every hire that I made, and people are like, yeah, they're decent
Mm.
because people buy from people, five
Hmm.
USPs personally, and then they back it up with logic. That's the way buying
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
psychology that procurement process happens. So you've got to get the 5 business logic USPs, 5 personal logic USPs, and then
Mm.
that's your starting point. From then on, you've got to know what you're getting yourself into.
Mm.
How, and I like to use an analogy about a dog chasing a ball, because a dog will chase a ball wherever you throw it. You know,
Yeah.
you throw it left, right, up, down, the dog's going to be on that ball.
Hmm.
And sometimes people's sales strategy can be like that, but the ball's going over the cliff, but they haven't taken the time to look past where the ball's actually going, and they're setting
Mm.
themselves up in a market that is effectively shrinking. People aren't joining that market. There's no investment in that
Mm.
market. There's a new government change, and there could be some different policies that impact
Yeah.
that market's, stability. So you don't want to build your house on sand. So you have to be able to SWOT analysis the market you're trying to go into and figure
Mm.
out why it's growing, if it's growing, when it's growing, how it's growing, who's growing within it, what kind of
Mm.
hires are going to be the key hires that are going to be made within that, and how you can add value to that process. Because there's going to be somebody feeling pain within that process. How
Mm.
do you solve that problem? That's it.
Nice, mate. It's so good when I hear people like you with your experience talk about these things, because one of the imposter syndrome voice in my head has got significantly quieter. Like I
Hmm.
said, the thing that I do with the whiteboard there, when I look back at what I've done and what I've achieved and people I've helped, that imposter syndrome voice does quieten down. But
Yeah,
sometimes I think back to things that I do with people, and I always sit down with people and say, what are your USPs? Oh, well, we're specialists in no. What separates you from your
yeah,
competitor? Oh, well, we've got X amount of people on the database. What separates you as a recruiter? Because they
yeah.
don't buy, and this is what I get into arguments with founders about. They don't
Hmm.
necessarily buy from the brand per se. They buy from the recruiter. I
Yep.
still get client calls to this point, Will, of people going, "Hi, Charles, how's it going? Yeah, don't suppose you've got anyone in London at the minute?" I'm like, "I haven't been in sales recruitment for ages, and you're calling me about this. This is mental to me."
Yeah.
So those personal USPs are absolutely huge. So what about once you've figured out what your two things, your personal value that you can offer, your
Hmm.
business value, so i.e. the things I said about, people on the database, all
Hmm.
that type of stuff. You
Yeah.
understood your ICP, you've pivoted into a good market, etc.
Yeah.
Then what?
You've got to know how to get in front of the people.
Hmm.
Every market is different, and every person within the market operates differently. Temp hiring managers operate very, very differently to contract and
Mm.
contract to perm. So you've got to figure out what is the path of least resistance to get in front of those people. Um, some industries are more open-minded to cold calls. Some are not. Some you'll never get anywhere. Like software development, if you cold call a hiring manager in a software development company and they're an engineer, you'll never hear from them again. But if you phone a construction company, who are doing temp and contract hires on the construction floor,
Hmm.
they're used to getting cold calls. They like to talk to people. These
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
those are the kind of people that are like, yeah, okay, well, what you got for me? Um, so you've got to really think about the demographics of how
Mm.
transactions take place within
Yeah.
the market that you've picked. Then you've got to think about how they interact with tech.
Hmm.
Um, some industries are a lot more adaptive and a lot more open-minded to an email, to a LinkedIn message, to contacting them through social media,
Mm.
WhatsApp. You've got to think about how the market that you're operating and
Mm.
interacts with technology, because you can make a strategy then that is specific to the kind of tech platforms that your hiring
Yeah.
managers or your candidates will use, right? Um, Face to face, really. Where do these people operate face to face?
Hmm.
Some of them might go to networking events, some of them might go to meetups, roundtables. There's a million different ways where they get face to face. So there's non-face to face sales and there's face to face sales. That's where the tech element comes into it in the non-face to face sales. And then the face to face sales is like, well, how do I then go and get in front of these people and show them what I'm about and who I am?
Mm.
And you have to make a strategy for each. Um, and then you've got to really have a robust follow-up game. For me, one of the biggest things in recruitment and business development, people that drop the ball on, is follow-ups. They just don't
Yep.
do it. They'll make a cold call. That person will tell them to fuck off, and they'll be like, "Never call me again." And
And
they
they never
won't.
do.
They'll never call them
Yeah.
again. I'm like, what do you mean you're not going to call them again? Like, you could call them 10 minutes from now and they wouldn't remember your name at all. So
Mm.
why does it matter that you're going to call them in another 4 weeks and just test the water again? Like,
Mm.
you'd never be scared off by that. So you've got to create a really good follow-up game, and your
Mm.
touch points are really important. You've got to record your touch points as and
Hmm.
when you make them, because then what you're building is data in front of your own
Mm.
eyes. You know, I would make my team show me almost like a spreadsheet of the touch points that they've made. How many more touch points can you make? Right, show me 5 touch points straight away. Okay, well, here's the 5. One is LinkedIn, one is message, one is SMS,
Mm.
one is WhatsApp, one is whatever it
Mm.
might be. Go and find me another 5. What do you mean? Find 5 more. Come back, find me 5 more. Okay, now find me 5 more. There is no more. 5 more. And to the point where I actually genuinely believe that all the touch points have been covered off, that's then starting to take the shape of a strategy, right? Because you've got cold calls, you've got this literal
Hmm.
like line of how you get in touch with this person,
Mm.
and you track each one. Okay, well, I got in touch with this person this way, and
Hmm.
before long there's a pattern building, and you start to identify where
Love
your
that.
actual rich sources of
Mm.
touch point lead generation comes from.
Mm.
And as time goes by, it just whittles down and whittles down until you've got 3 or 4 killer touch points where you think that is how
Mm.
I sell in this market, and you double down on that.
Mm. Yeah, that's amazing. Something you said there about the software development market. One of my best clients does like software engineers,
Mm.
senior engineers, etc.
Mhm.
And he implemented like cold calling sprints. And the European desk, not so bad. The US desk was like 300 dials to one connect.
Yeah.
And then you get the classic in the market, which is a thing I want to segue to in a second about, we're not getting any success from calls. We're getting all our success from emails.
Yeah.
And then we look through the data, and 80% of new jobs and new logos signed on were via spec outs, email, targeted
Huh.
LinkedIn, personalized messages, etc. Great, phenomenal, cool. Let's hone in on that. However, what we can't do is then get a bite back from an email and think you have a relationship or a job when a client goes, candidate looks good, we'll be hiring and Jan, give us a call then.
Yeah.
Like, okay, now the next thing in the strategy is actually how do we work on email objection handling? How do we actually work on trying to get them showing value on email to then
Hmm.
entice them to get onto to get onto the phone or a video call? Because
Yeah.
you'll know this, right? I got taught this years ago. You can entice via a message, but you can never influence.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's a very difficult strategy to build your house around where um, people just don't respond.
Mm-mm,
I think ghosting is ever prominent in not just the recruitment space, but in
mm,
general. People are very used to just ignoring emails, spam, whatever they might call it.
mm-hmm,
So once you get a bite, I think that then is where the fun starts, because that's then when you can
mm,
kind of build a little bit of a house of touch points around them.
mm-hmm,
Um, you know, that person has interacted and communicated with you. It doesn't mean they're going to continue doing that, but you can stay on their
mm,
radar, and that's what you have to try and do. A week later, you're going on a different touch point. Just say, look, here's the candidate's Git profile, or here is, something that the candidate had made an article that might be
mm,
relevant to you. They're actually really interested in meeting you. 4 weeks, 6 weeks, you're talking about making this hire. You've got a 4 to 5 week process. So let's, instead
mm,
of making a knee jerk hire, let's get this person in the day that the hire opens.
mm-hmm.
It's a difficult thing to do, but it's something that I think candidate recruiters have been trying to figure out since day one of recruitment email marketing.
Yeah, yeah. Is when I got into L&D, that was the first thing I noticed. They use Source Whale, which I had no idea existed, and I was like, "Wow,
Mm.
this is a phenomenal tool. I wish I had this back when I was a trainee recruiter."
Hmm.
And one of the first tasks that I had was helping build like an email marketing campaign.
Yeah,
And then they were
yeah,
like, "You were really good at BD, Charles. What was your strategy?" And I was like, "Just call as many fucking people as possible, go
yeah,
to as many networking and networking events and
yeah,
conferences, and
yeah,
just build relationships, get people to love me, and then sell off the back of that." How many spec
yeah,
outs did I do? Fucking barely any. I did verbal spec outs, I had
yeah.
like a hot list of candidates, but I never really did the email. But then again, I was fortunate that I say fortunate, but my market was field salespeople. So they're
Mm.
constantly in the car, lonely as fuck, listening to podcasts and listening to
Yeah,
music. So you give them a call, they're like, oh my God, someone to speak to.
yeah,
But
yeah,
there was
yeah.
something I wanted to ask you actually, because it was one of the things we wrote down before we recorded, and it
Mm.
segues in really well actually. We talked about, the cold calling aspect and the strategy and like email
Hmm.
marketing and stuff, like being in recruitment for as long as you have, and I've been doing it for nearly 11 years. I
Mm.
think there are certain things that work slightly better now, and there's certain things that worked probably better back then. From your perspective and from your sort of insights and understanding, what would you say is like kind of worked then, doesn't work now, and vice versa, if anything?
I think what we have access to now is obviously AI, and we have access to automation tools.
Mm,
Um, Now, automation and AI isn't the replacement. It's not the
mm,
silver bullet that will just do the hard graft that effectively you have to put in. You have to always focus around how you demonstrate value to people, and spamming them and mass contacting them isn't going to do that. So for me now, from where I was a few years back, blimey, when I did start at one, we didn't have the automation tools really.
mm,
We didn't have AI. It was literally me using a tool called Lusher at that
mm-hmm,
time, which was wicked back then.
mm,
Paid a fortune for it, and I had literally everybody's number. It's not so good now because people have wised to it and they've pulled their
yeah.
details off it on the most part. But it was ace then, and I would
Mm,
literally just every day I would have like 100 people, and I was like, right, one of these motherfuckers has got some money for me, and I wouldn't stop until somebody was saying, right, I actually need to make some hires. And that was my strategy then. It was just get all the right people, make sure I've got my value prop lined up, make sure they know what I'm about and
mm,
how I roll and how I can help them. And I have to know what their pain points might be, and then qualify that when I get them on the
mm,
phone. Whereas now I can create like 2 or 3 versions of myself.
Hmm.
So I can use like Meet Alfred or Dripify to really kind of grow a network in specific talent pools and specific pools of hiring managers. I can then double that up with an outreach email
Hmm.
campaign so that we've got two touch points covered without me actually doing anything really. And then we can support that with like WhatsApp, we can support that with phone
Hmm.
calls. But ultimately still you've got to demonstrate value. So all of those things and all of those touch points and all of those outreach campaigns, they have to be
Hmm.
underpinned by demonstrating value. How do
Hmm.
you help them solve a problem and how
Hmm.
quickly can you do it? That's what it's every BD strategy that ever exists will focus around is value add.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And on that as well, in terms of what's changed in the market, like, I'm a millennial. I'm 31 soon. Well, when this comes out, I'll probably be 31. But a lot of people in recruitment now, like trainees and stuff, coming in
Mm.
are obviously Gen Z,
Yep.
and I kind of get a little bit frustrated because when I got into recruitment, my generation was called lazy because we're millennials and etc. Now Gen Z are all called lazy. It's
Hmm.
bollocks. Like you can't just say every single person from that generation
Yeah.
is I got a call coming through. Yeah, you can't say everyone in this generation is lazy, but there are nuances and differences. And I think something I've said many times on the podcast is that the post-COVID generation of recruiters that are coming in,
Mm.
where we were in lockdown, we could kind of click our fingers and get anything to the house because we couldn't leave the house. Now they're coming into recruitment and having that mentality of,
Mm.
right, I'm going to make a few BD calls today. And similar to what you said earlier, like I'm going to get someone on the phone and they're going to sign a contract right now. Nah. Like I speak to people at the moment that taken years, and I've had this before, and I'm sure you have, where it's taken years to sign on a client. So
Yeah.
you talked a lot about mindset. What do you think is the difference between people pre-COVID and people after COVID? That sort of mindset when it comes to, recruitment, business development. What would you say?
Um, I think the culture inherently changes. Otherwise, they wouldn't be called Gen Z. There would be no such thing as millennials. There'd be no such thing as boomers because there is
Mm,
a cultural nuance to each of those demographics psychologically.
mm,
But I think the most important thing to figure out is how you actually touch those people, how you train them,
mm,
how you get the
mm,
best out of them. There is a way to get the best out of people, irrespective of the demographic or the box that you want to try and squeeze them into. It's a tough one. It's a tough one because it's a real case by case, because I know some millennials who are absolute savage. My nephew, he's 18 and he's a monster. He did his work experience with me and he
mm.
he set my record for the highest fee across my company and it was
Really?
like 16. So he's a savage. So like you've got to think about how you attract the right people to your business, how you onboard the right people
Mm,
because they exist. You've just got to
mhm,
find and attract the right people that are savages. If you're bringing a goalkeeper, let's use a football analogy. If
yeah.
you're going to bring a goalkeeper in and you're going to expect him to play up front, um, you're hiring the wrong person, right? So you've got
Mm,
to think what stage is my business at the moment and what kind of hire do I need in my organization to achieve what I'm trying to achieve from a business perspective.
mm,
At the start, is there really any value in hiring people that are passive, that are
mm,
easily knocked off their feet, that are, very they find it challenging to problem solve.
mm,
They constantly need to put their hand up for somebody to solve a problem for them. That's not going to be the
mm,
right hire that you need in your
mm,
early stages of recruitment. So you've got to think about what your hiring strategy looks like based on the actual position that your business is
mm,
in, and then figure out how you actually extract the right
mm,
kind of information from the interview
mm,
that will find you the people that you need. Because they're out there,
mm.
they're 100% out there.
They
You've just
are.
got to find out how you get them on board. That's why recruitment exists, right? So you can find these
Yeah.
people and get them into your business.
Mm. The most ironic thing is recruitment companies are probably the worst at hiring people for their businesses, but like, they position themselves in the market of getting like the best engineers or the best
Yeah,
construction managers, but then
yeah,
hiring for their own business, 9 times out of 10, they're shocking.
yeah,
One thing that I think is a reoccurring theme in the industry, and I typically did this when I was hiring for people in my team, was looking for
yeah,
people that have got a sports background, firstly. The
yeah.
first two people I hired in my team, one was an ex-rugby player, sports
Hmm.
science degree. The other one he was like Team GB hockey player and a hockey
Hmm.
coach.
Yeah,
Went through some serious like adversity through sport. And then the other thing I looked for was real life adversity. So you obviously mentioned there about, going through like essentially like a breakdown and stuff like that.
mm,
That
mm.
it makes or breaks people. You either come out the other side like a fucking really, really strong human being, or it can
Yeah,
break you and you can become like, a vase put back together by sellotape type thing. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I do.
Yeah. So what would you say about that? Because I would say those are the two things that if you're looking to hire people, like look at those two things, I think would be like the best.
I think the one thing that people really miss out on is what people's motivators are at that point in time. Because, I used to fight people for fun in the ring in front of my friends and family. I was motivated by winning a medal, and that was it wouldn't drive me now, not at all.
Mm.
So for someone to hire me on the merit of something I did 20 years ago, yes, I went through some adversity. Yes, I went through them things, but that doesn't mean I want to do that right now. So I try and extract from people when I'm meeting them to hire in one of my businesses. And it's right or wrong that I do this. I try and really push into their personal relationships.
Mm.
What's your have you got siblings? No, I haven't got siblings. Okay, well, who have you got a point to prove to? Who is it? Some people have recruitment is an industry of misfits, right? We're all typically college dropouts or university dropouts that have somehow landed in recruitment. I speak for myself there. That's just a general sweeping statement. But there is always a motivator there which is strong. So I've got a big brother. My big brother is a very, very high achiever. He's a airline. He can fly planes. He can fly helicopters. He's like one of those kinds of people. So I always had, I've got to be better than my brother mentality, and nothing would stop me. Nobody would beat me. Nobody was better than me because my brother, since I was a kid, was somebody that I was like, I've got to be better than him. I have a dad, a parent who is very critical, and he was very critical in my younger years, which made me very passionate about trying to do the best that I possibly could because I was constantly seeking his approval. And for me, that's what has given me a lot of drive and a lot of discipline to really push myself forward and to excel. I look for those characteristics in people. I try and find out the relationship that they have around them and who is actually the driving force behind them that are really going to push through the hard times. Because my brother actually said to me, my brother was in the parachute company in the army, and he was the only one person to pass out of a platoon of 300 people. And I was like, why? Why were you the only one? And he's like, because all I could imagine was my dad sniggering at me and saying that I failed. And he's like, there was no way that I was going back with that to look forward to. So I pushed through. If you can find that in people, that little motivator there, which is something that they will literally die on the hill for, you'll find top performers.
My God. Do you know what? It's so interesting. I literally had this conversation with a recruiter last night. I literally had this because we're a business I'm working with. We're trying to pivot into like a 180 model because we've basically got like a group of fairly mediocre 360 consultants, but some of them are amazing at delivery and some of them are amazing at business development. So we're like, just makes sense. We could have like a bunch of elite people, but just pivoting that respect. And one of the senior consultants sat me down and was just like, one thing we don't do enough of is actually sit down and understand what our motivators are. And I just sat there and I was like, what are your motivators? Like, why are you here? Like, what gets you up in the morning? And he was like, yeah, of course, like most people are money motivated, but like, that's not what it is for me. I want to be the go-to person in this industry. I want to look back in 5 years' time and I want to look back at what I've built. And I want people to go, that was the guy that built that market out. And then I was like digging into the why of that, why is that actually a thing, etc. And not just like, oh yeah, great, like actually going to like the deeper level to it and things like that. But it's so interesting. I think
it's who you're trying to prove yourself to. The question is, who are you trying to prove yourself to? Well, what do you mean? There is always somebody at some point. It's usually in the formative years of somebody's life where they've had a judgy dad, or they looked down or sniggered, or someone had said, you're never going to achieve nothing in your life. There's that one person that sits in that mind rent free all the time where somebody will literally break their neck to prove them wrong. All right. That's up to them. Read a book called Fortitude. There's a great book called Fortitude that goes into the psychology of that exact mindset and why it exists. It's a very, very good book to read.
Fortitude, right? Yeah, I'm actually looking for some a book or an audio book to listen to at the moment. So yeah, that would be one. Remind me after this actually, because that's a good one for me. By the way, I hope you can appreciate that. You obviously can see like my Venom gloves, my old boxing gloves, my MMA thing, my kettlebell. You have no idea how hard it is for me not to then just dive into your MMA and martial arts career, like, because this is a recruitment podcast. So yeah, I would fucking love to like dive into it. But if we could maybe spend 1 minute on it and then we'll go on to the last topic about what you're doing now. How long did you train martial arts for? Just out of curiosity.
So I started training martial arts when I was 17. And the reason that I started training martial arts is because I got beat up in the street by a couple of dudes and I felt completely helpless. I was never an aggressive guy. I was always very timid. I was always very like a bit scared of confrontation. And that just kind of made me think I've got to be able to look after myself here. So I started Thai boxing at a place called K-Star near me.
Sorry, K-Star, is that? I'm trying to think.
Steve Logan's organization.
It's not the one with the blue and the yellow shorts, is it?
Yeah, blue, white, and yellow.
What's the guy's name that runs it?
Steve Logan. It's his organization.
I might be thinking of somewhere else, but yeah, I'll speak to you about it after. Yeah, I'm getting sidetracked, but yeah, go on, carry on.
Yeah, so my very first coach was a guy called Henry Clementson, who is the Edwards brothers. Edwards was that's his coach. That's his stand-up striking coach. So he was my very first coach. Then I started to do jiu-jitsu under Brello Estima and his camp, a guy called Neil Simpkin. I had access to some amazing people there. So I kind of just took to it like a duck to water, and I started competing as soon as I could, really, considering I was terrified. And I just won everything I entered, really. I won the Feeling National Grappling Championship. I won the GB Open, the Nationals. I won my first Thai fight. I won my first MMA fight, fought at football stadiums. It was just wicked. And then I had a pretty nasty injury and I had to stop. And then I found sales.
Oh, fair. What injury did you have?
I tried to cut down to 77 kilos, and I'm 94 kilos naturally.
Oh, wow.
Because I wanted a gold medal at a few different weight categories. A bit greedy. Yeah. I know what you're thinking, but ultimately it was too light for me. I was about 5% body fat, and I twisted, and I broke all of the ribs broke, and the muscle, the cartilage, the ligament all snapped clean off the bone. Oh. So I've got a scar now through my midsection that looks like I've been macheted.
Oh my God!
It was a good one.
Jesus Christ! What, all the ribs?
Yeah, it all just snapped. I remember the sound to this day. 18 months rehab. I had 18 months rehab. I had surgery, 18 months rehab, and on my first training session back, snapped again, and that was that.
Oh my God! Yeah. Oh my God, that is rough. I've heard some rough injuries, and I've had some rough injuries of my own, but that just sounds fucking agonizing, mate. So yeah, but no, fair. It's interesting because every single time I speak to somebody that has done martial arts, that I feel like people that have done it have got a completely different outlook just in life. And I wouldn't necessarily say I'm the most spiritual person, but I do believe that doing things like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu, Thai boxing, etc., it's quite a spiritual thing. And ever since I got into martial arts, I've never been in any confrontation. Prior to getting into martial arts, loads of confrontation.
Mate, the art of fighting is not fighting, especially if you're on the street and stuff like that. It's just, what's the point? Put that time and energy into your career, into your relationships, and keep good quality people around you that share those same values, and you're just going to elevate your life. 1% will turn into 10%, 10 to 20, 20 to 40, and before you know it, you're a different version of the person you were 12 months ago.
Absolutely. Well, talking about the martial arts and talking about your recruitment experience, what you're doing now isn't actually recruitment, but it's kind of, it's rec tech. The first question I want to ask you before we go into actually what it is you're doing and all the rest of it. But before we click record, I said to you something I'm really, really passionate about is obviously the recruitment industry, but how much the recruitment industry does for you. If you stick in it for a long amount of time, you can essentially go into any business. The guy I sat down with this morning is a website designer. He started off as a recruitment consultant. He's running his own business. I'm a trainer. I started off in recruitment. Like, I wanted to get your perspective from this as well. Like, what does recruitment do for people? Like, what skills do you learn from it that can help you go into pretty much whatever?
Blimey. I mean, the things that I've done in my life the last 15 years, like I've spent a lot of fun tokens, money that I should have invested, money that I should have put into property, money that I should have saved. I invested that in doing awesome things, and I wouldn't change it, And I mean, I left school with 3 GCSEs. I couldn't have made more of a hash of it if I tried, really. And I had to go and kind of find my path one way or another. But getting into recruitment, I would never have dreamed in a million years that I would be able to buy myself a new SL Mercedes, which I did, be able to go and just buy myself all these cool things that at the time I thought were pretty cool. I was in my mid-20s and I was earning decent money. Looking back now, I'm like, you bloody idiot, I've got a pair of Skechers now, I'm happy. But ultimately, I think it serves, there's an element of recruitment, there's a way of recruitment for every person. But I think it's got such a stigma attached, and it's such a cutthroat industry that people get burnt so fast and so hard that they never give it a second look. And the amount of people that have left recruitment in the last 18 months to go and take adjacent industries or different industries, or have pivoted out of recruitment, who just needed to find the right industry for them in recruitment, the right culture of a business to work within. It's sad. It's a shame, really. But to the people that really commit to it, make the right plan and focus on what they're actually trying to get out of it, you can do anything you want to do. You know, there's so many people that I've trained over the course of time who are now working in, big tech vendors and tech startups. Seems there's a few tech companies who follow the companies that I set up and just try and steal my team members. I know. So it's whatever you want it to be, mate. And such is life. You know, it's whatever you want it to be. You set the plan, you make the agenda, you have an absolute air of accountability about you that nobody's going to do it for you. You have to wake up in the morning and make that happen. You'll make it happen, whatever it is, you know. And the people, I see so many people posting on LinkedIn now, desperate, please. I'm desperate for a job. The market is tight. The market is tough. I can't pay my bills. I saw a guy the other day. He put a GoFundMe up to fix his tap in his bathroom. He's that desperate for work, and I'm like, fuck. Is the society going in such a way now that people don't think they have accountability and they don't have control over what they do day to day? You know, go and look yourself in the mirror, whatever you're doing, and think, right, am I fully taking responsibility here for what it is I'm trying to achieve? And if it doesn't work, can I hold my hands up and say, I give everything I possibly could. I left it out there and I've gone out on my shield. 99% of the times the answer is no, but people will kid themselves that it is not that. So the recruitment industry is a great vessel to earn decent money, which it is, and to set you up a life that you can, you can do really cool things and set your future self up. I think it's got a shelf life. Typically, I find it about 3 to 4 years of you going gung ho and flat out, where people burn out. So you have to have a 3 to 4 year strategy. Where if you're building a business, your strategy needs to be that you're out of that business effectively and it runs itself. If you're a recruiter, it has to be that you step up somehow and you're not just flat out on the tools for 3 to 4 years, because you will burn out. So that's for me what, think people have to be mindful of, but it's whatever you want it to be, mate, recruitment.
Yeah, I just think just the skills that you learn day to day, dealing with people, the negotiation, like these are just like really solid life skills that take you into anything that you do. And I've said this on the podcast before, but like when I got into recruitment, prior to that, I had like a really, really bad experience with my mental health, suicidal tendencies. Really, I was like on medication for anxiety, depression, and sleeping pills. And touch wood, I don't really have any of those issues at all. Obviously, you get like the odd bit of anxiety because you're a bloody human. And if you have like a horrible life event, you might get a bit depressed for a few weeks. But largely, because of the experience I've had and the successes I've had, it's made me so much more confident. And the fact that, starting out alone was the most daunting thing I've ever done in my entire life. But I just looked back and thought, right, okay, what did I do when I set up that cold desk? Like, what did I do there? How did I approach the cold calls, the strategy, my value, all that type of stuff? So yeah, I'm just so passionate about that, Will, as you can tell, because, I think a lot of people look down on the industry, unfortunately. And I think that you can not only just earn a load of great money and do cool things, but just the skills that you learn, the people that you meet, etc. Is just amazing.
Mate, I think like, the biggest skill that I've brought out of the recruitment industry is just my bullshit radar. I have an ability now to sniff bullshit like that. When someone's bullshitting me or blagging me, I'm like, yeah. 15 years of being bullshit and blagged, you got no chance. Might probably make a good police detective or something like that. But I do think it gives you a lot. It does give you a lot in terms of career. And the people that look down on the industry, they're people that obviously aren't cool with themselves. So, they like to piss on somebody else's chips because, they ain't got good things going on. So you got to let haters hate and they can crack on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple more things before we do wrap up, because I'm conscious of time. Now you're doing what you're doing. You're not in sales. Sorry, you're not in recruitment, obviously. How has that been different? I don't know if this is necessarily like the first thing you've done outside of sort of recruitment, but how has this been different in comparison to like running and scaling a recruitment business?
Yeah, I've still got a recruitment business that's active. But like I said, that 3 to 4 years, you get yourself up out of it, and that runs itself. But what I'm doing now is a product. So it's the first product-based business that I'm building. And it's an experience. But again, what recruitment has kind of given me is to make the plan properly, to validate the plan, to make sure that you over validate the plan and continue to validate the plan, and figure out how you can add value to the people that you're trying to sell to, which is what's going on at the moment. So do you mind if I do a quick intro to what I'm building?
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
Yeah. So what I'm building is called RekBot. It's an AI, it's a conversational AI platform, basically, which is a training and onboarding tool for the recruitment industry. So where perhaps you've seen, and anybody listening has seen, pretty broken, inconsistent training, like you said yourself, you'll go in on a day rate, and a week later the dynamic has changed, the landscaping changed, and you haven't been able to keep your finger on that pulse. So this is a platform kind of like Duolingo. It's like the Duolingo for recruitment.
That's cool.
So it's gamified, it's completely personalized, and you can log into it anywhere, anytime you want. And you can build yourself environments that you can practice. So I was just practicing this while it's kind of while this stuff was in the background. I'm making some marketing videos, and I was actually practicing cold calling with the AI agent, and she was smashing me. So she hung up on me twice, so honestly, she battered me. But I think if somebody can get through the cold calling that's on RekBot and not get hung up on, and get them to agree to meet you, you can cold call anybody on this planet. I've geared it to be brutal. But that's what people need, because it replicates real life. I think if you go and have a conversation with ChatGPT or some of the open AI tools that are out there now, it's very polite, it's very passive. It will continue to answer your questions. There are some sales training tools out there that are conversational AI, but they're just plugins. So the way that I've programmed this is to replicate a real conversation. It doesn't like you on a cold call. As soon as it answers the phone, it's hostile to you. It's like, how did you get this number? Who is this? And then you have to buy yourself 30 seconds, everything that I've been through, I've put into this platform. So you can build your modules, and it's delivered in a lecture format. So the AI avatar will speak to you, and you can stop and ask questions at any point. There's a shadowing session, so you can watch AI talk to AI, which is really creepy, but that's
trippy as fuck.
Yeah, it's trippy, man. But ultimately, you're watching a candidate talk to a client, or you're watching a recruiter talk to a candidate. You can build these scenarios, and then you've got the live environment where, you get to practice and talk to AI, and AI will interact you as if it is your candidate or your customer. And then, there's loads of gamified element to it as well. I mean, that's just a brief snapshot of what it does. But the reason that I want to make that is because conversational AI is going to completely change the e-learning industry next year. It's going to flip it on its head completely. Gamification and emotional involvement in learning is where the actual retention of knowledge takes place at the highest rate. So where people are typically asked to go and log onto a platform, I know there are some organizations out there that have training platforms. You can go and log in, watch a video, download some content. There's not an emotional connection there, which is, for me, it's still effective. Some people still learn that way, right? Yeah. But on the most part, people need to be engaged to learn, and they need to feel something as they're learning for it to stick. Yeah, that's what I'm really trying to tap into. So it's launching January. I've got 2 pretty large recruitment organizations that are going to be trialing it. But I'm looking for people who are pretty forward thinking, really, to come and beta test it with me, and be early adopters, really. So, anybody listening that wants to come and have a go, get in touch, and I can talk you through it, and you can get hammered to death by the BD cold calling scenario, which I just have myself.
Well, you sent me the link, actually, so I'm going to give it a try, because I know there's another company that does something similar. But the feedback I gave to them was the cold calls were very market specific, if that makes sense. So I think one of the ones that I did was as a finance director, and I don't know anything about that industry. So the chatbot just came back and just said, so tell me about your experience within this particular thing, and what's your thoughts on this particular certification. So I'm just fucking frantically Googling, what the hell does this qualification mean? And he was like, unfortunately, it doesn't sound like you understand what you're talking about. Goodbye. I was like, oh, right. Is yours quite market specific, or is it more sort of broader? How does it work in that respect?
You're going to be able to personalize it. So when you buy RekBot, let's say, you own your recruitment company, you've got 50 or 100 people, wherever it might be, it will onboard you. So you'll go through a process with it where it will ask you what industry you're in. I'm probably going to give your the person you're talking about how to build a better platform, but it's going to personalize it for you. And all the prompt and engineering in the back end will then deliver that to your users. So the way I've programmed this thing is to be able to recognize value. So what this call agent is looking for is value. It's not looking for a specific, like, fintech or software or accounting, blah, blah, blah. It's just looking for value. And then what the prompt engineering will do is add the nuances behind that, around your margins, your fees, so the way it's going to demonstrate value is it's actually going to plug into the CRM system. I've got a partnership building with Loxo and Bullhorn at the moment, where it will extract the data. So it'll be able to see your recruitment teams, how many CVs they've sent, all of the metrics that you're going to want to measure them by, and it can give actionable coaching prompts to you or your team leaders. Because team leaders typically, they're not, in recruitment, good billers typically get promoted, right? And that doesn't always mean they're a good leader or a good manager. So what RekBot will do is it will prompt them to be better coaches, and it will say, like, right, Will's behind this week. It's Wednesday. You'll get a prompt to say it's behind. Will's behind. He's only sent 3 CVs. The target is to send 10. You might want to check in and find out what's going on. We suggest you have this kind of a conversation. So it's all very data driven. It's all very much based around continuous elevation of performance.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm aiming for.
Man, that sounds mega. That sounds absolutely mega. Amazing. Well, Will, look, thank you very much for coming on. Genuinely, like, if I could have like a time limit for 2 hours and keep people engaged, like, I genuinely would, because I feel like you and I could speak forever. But no, it's been really, really exciting speaking to you. I've personally learned absolutely loads. I'm sure people listening, watching would have learned at least 1 or 2 things from this minimum. But as you know, the last question I finish off the show with is, following this episode, how can people get 1% better in recruitment?
I think we've covered most of it in what we've spoke about, in honesty. I think to get 1% better, you've got to really be focused on your task. You've got to really know what your outcomes you're driving and the why, understand. I think what we spoke about earlier, not a lot of people understand what truly motivates them. It took me a lot of soul searching to figure out that it was actually my dad and my big brother, which was my main drivers. So I think once people get a real good grip on themselves, they can properly motivate forward and turn 1 into 10 to 20 to 40 to 60 and beyond.
I love that. Have you ever heard of have you ever heard anyone say a phrase, the FU mentality?
Go on.
It's, well, the fuck you mentality, basically. Because what you said about like your dad and like your older brother, I was fired from pretty much every job I had up until my first job in recruitment, and then I was almost fired from then, but I technically quit. And every single boss that I had, I basically turned around and just said, you're going to look back at this and it will be the worst decision you ever made because I'm going to be so successful. And then I'll get sacked from my next job. And I'm like, you're going to look back at this and you're going to go, And then I got like kind of sacked-ish from my first 2 jobs in recruitment. And I was like, right, you guys are going to look back and go, fuck, we made a really bad mistake. And then I had a 6-year stint at a business, and I still keep in touch with my old manager, who was technically not a manager. He was just like a top biller who just like kept on top of you. And he opens up these days and says, I never really managed you. I didn't want to be a manager, but like I was more of a mate. But anyway, he would call me and just be like, mate, people in the office look at your LinkedIn stuff and they're like, fucking, what's a fucking cunt. One arsehole. Like, look at him, he's actually doing all right. So that for me was like the big driver. And I say to people, like, who are you trying to say fuck you to?
Yeah. Exactly my point, mate. And the point we made earlier about there is a form of recruitment that will suit everybody. You found it, right? You stuck at it enough to find the method of working with a leader or a manager that worked for you and him or her. And now look at you. That's why I think it's important that people understand what kind of hires they're trying to make and how they can actually coach people to be better. And the people that are applying for jobs, what environment do they need to be successful? Because I think it's important that people understand, like, what environment do I thrive in? What's the environment that I actually can survive in and really excel? And what are the kind of people that I need around me to do that? And they have to look for that in businesses, right? If you go and join a business and it's toxic day one, you're going to fail. That's not, it's not always your fault.
100%, mate. Well, look, again, thank you very much. In terms of how people can reach out to you, what's the best avenues?
Ping me on LinkedIn. Let's connect on LinkedIn. Anybody that wants to just connect and have a chat. If there's any organizations that want to give RekBot a try or talk to me about it, let's do it. I'm moving to Dubai in January, so anybody in Dubai that wants to meet me for a coffee, I'll be there. So can't wait to get out of this cold weather, mate. And yeah, see you there next year at some point.
Nice. All right, well, lovely. Thank you very much for coming on, mate.
Wicked.
And for everyone that's made it this far, like, subscribe. If you're on YouTube and Spotify, give us a comment. The weekly newsletter, when this comes out, I'm not sure when it is, but yeah, the monthly newsletters hit over 1,000 subscribers. So that will just give you the rundown of every single episode, some key quotes and what everyone said about the final question and things like that. The first in-person episode will be releasing in Q1 in 2025, and we're aiming to do one in-person podcast every single month. And the big goal that I'm setting myself is we're aiming to do a minimum of 2 events, live podcasts in 2025. Big goal, but we can do it. So thank you everyone for watching and viewing, and until next time.